3, 2, 1, 0.
And good evening. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight is just a short episode, and I really wanted to talk about what it's like to see a mental health professional. You know, what it's like to go to an appointment, what kind of you can expect when you go to your first appointment, what maybe you can expect when trying to set up appointments, things like that. I'll be covering this kind of from a perspective of people in the United States, since that's where I'm from. I would assume. It's pretty similar around the world of what to expect at an appointment. Obviously, it's probably different in how you get an appointment since a lot of our medical systems and insurance systems are completely different. So in our case, typically you can, request a mental health provider through your primary care, through the referral system. So, or potentially straight through the mental health provider themselves. For example, in my case, I was able to request one through my primary care. He put a referral in, and then I could have sought one out in the same network that my primary care is in. I eventually decided not to do that, and due to the long wait times, and I found another provider that was in my insurance network that's local to where I'm at, and I ended up making the appointment straight up with the provider. For folks in the military, it's somewhat similar. All right, sometimes you'll have to make a referral through your primary care physician on base or whoever you're seeing. Other times you can go straight to the mental health provider. Sometimes we do have units now with embedded mental health providers there, so you can go straight to them there. And then obviously there's some of those other entities on base, Fleet and Family Support Center for the Navy, things like that, where there's outside social workers that can help us too. So what really can you expect? Honestly, it's kind of a myriad of different office types for mental health professionals. Sometimes you'll see them in your hospital settings. Sometimes you'll see them in your clinical settings. So think of your standard waiting room, standard check-in desk, things like that. Sometimes there'll be a private practice where it could be just the provider with a little office and no check-in desk, maybe a check-in desk. I've had it kind of all different kind of ways. I've had it where literally it was just the provider. You go in, there's a little waiting room, and then the provider. I've had it other times where you go to your normal clinic hospital setting, and it's a normal kind of sterile waiting room with a check-in desk, and then you go back to see your provider. And then also you have a lot of the private practices where maybe, I don't want to say upscale, that's probably the bad word, but it's just a little bit nicer where maybe the waiting rooms are a little bit nicer. There's calming music playing, there's coffee and tea out, there's water, and then you go back to your provider. Now, I will say kind of a standard thing is, the providers don't really work out of your exam type room, right? They have very comfortable offices or rooms, typically with a desk, a couple chairs, maybe a couch, very comforting settings, relaxing, tranquil type settings. All right, that's obviously on purpose. But it does help when trying to, break through some of these mental health things we're all going through. So what kind of expect, right? So you just made your first appointment. A lot of the times, especially now with the way technology is, a lot of the stuff, you're going to get a lot of stuff maybe before your appointment to fill out, right? Sometimes, like for my current provider, uses an online website and an app. And in her case, before the first appointment, I got a bunch of stuff to fill out. Obviously, you get your normal disclaimer type forms, right? But you also get maybe some tests or some evaluations. Some of these will maybe evaluate your anxiety, your possibility of having ADHD, things like that. But they're kind of like these initial intake forms to kind of just give the provider some sort of early insight into what you're dealing with, right? And sometimes you won't do that beforehand. Sometimes you do that actually at the first appointment. I've done it multiple ways where, you've had it beforehand, and you have it at the appointment, or you just had it beforehand. There was other times where you literally filled out a questionnaire every appointment before you went back into your appointment. And it just kind of depends on the provider and depends on how they're all they set their practice up. But what kind of can you expect, right? That first appointment is probably a very important one. Okay, that's kind of their time to evaluate you as best as they can, right? You typically only get 45 minutes to an hour for an appointment. That's not a ton of time, okay? But that is really your time to kind of let loose and tell that provider why you're there, what you need, things along those lines, all right? They might give you some questionnaires. They might have some pointed questions. But, those are all there for that provider to be able to gauge, the things you're going through and maybe, the best practices to help you going forward. Sometimes, maybe that initial intake one's not going to be enough, right? But, that gives kind of, it sets a baseline for your treatment, right? And depending on what you're dealing with, you could have one issue that's really bothering you. You could have multiple issues, right? And that's going to take a number of appointments to work through. All right. There's no set thing. If your friend says, yeah, I had such a successful time at going to see a provider and getting help and treatment. It only took me two appointments and I was fine. Well, you could talk to another friend or a family member and it could take them 12 appointments. It could take them 15 appointments. It could be open-ended appointments, right? For me, I've been seeing a provider since probably, the first time was 2007, but the first time, was probably 2014 when I started seeing somebody on a regular basis. So I've pretty much been seeing somebody on a regular basis since 2014. So going on 10 years, and the treatment for me is, the continuous care. That might not be the same for other people. But, it just depends. So you go to your initial appointment, maybe, you're able to tell the psychologist, social worker, psychiatrist, what's bothering you, what some of your main issues are. And then, you start going to these follow-up appointments. And they're kind of gauge you too, on how to stack, if you have multiple things that are bothering you, let's tackle this one first versus that one. That's not going to be just they're not going to make those decisions just in a bubble. They're going to try to work with you and figure out, all right, which one should we tackle first, right? And which one should we tackle second? For me, do you tackle, my father's death when at a young age, or do you tackle some of the PTSD stuff in the military first? Typically for me, it seems to work where, obviously we tackle the stuff when I was younger first, because that kind of, laid the foundation for some of my issues, and then go into the stuff that happened when I was an adult later. But it really kind of all depends. It kind of all depends on how you work out. There's going to be days you go to appointments where you maybe don't feel like talking. And it just turns into a kind of a venting session, or just a session to talk, and you don't actually work on anything specific. Sometimes those are needed, right? I do that a lot. A lot of times it's just like a sounding board, right? That the provider's there as a sounding board for me, and we work through it, work through some problems over the last few weeks since the last appointment, and kind of go from there. And that's something good to bring up too. They'll work with you to figure out how often to see you. I'd say it's kind of common to see each other, see your provider weekly. I'd say when at least you're starting out. But it really kind of depends, right? Depending on how you're going, depending on how you feel, depending on how they think you're going through treatment. Maybe it's every other week or every 3 weeks or once a month. I've had it where it's been once a month, once every 6 weeks. Right now I'm doing every other week. And that seems to be working well. So again, that kind of really depends. But look, I think a big stigma to going and seeing a mental health provider is just that unknown, right? And really, I just want to convey the fact that, look, they're no different than any other provider, right? You go into the hospital to get checked up because you got a cold. You go into the hospital to see your primary care for a hurt arm. You go to the ER to get your leg looked at because you broke it playing hockey. Any of those things, it's a very similar concept, right? It's a very similar thing. But I just kind of wanted to dispel some of those myths out there and dispel some of those concerns, because I think a big thing that really doesn't help the stigma of getting mental health help. It's just that unknown, right? We don't know. Like I don't want to go to talk to somebody, or I don't know what to expect, or what's the provider going to be like? What's the office going to be like? Things like that, right? And to be honest, I'm not going to say it's easy, because there's days I don't want to go. There's days I don't want to talk about things. You are bringing up, typically if you're there for something, right, you are bringing up possibly traumatic events, traumatic things, stuff that's hard to talk about. And that takes a toll, 100% takes a toll on your body every time you bring it up, every time you talk about it, right? But it is kind of part of the process. So I will say, if you're on the fence about going, talk to somebody else that maybe went, do some research online, reach out to me. I'm obviously available via multiple social media sites, and I'm always willing to talk to people. And to be honest, I do that all the time. And it's kind of nice just to be able to impart some of that knowledge to hopefully help other people get to where they need to be. But like I said, you really need to think about it as it's just another medical appointment, and I'm going to help myself and get myself better, right? And then what happens after, you're a few appointments and you're kind of going along, and then they might introduce other types of treatments. There's EMDR, there's other type of treatments, which we'll talk in other podcasts, but there are specialized type of treatments depending on your issues or your conditions that might work good for you too. There's group therapy, there's things like that where, you can meet people that are going through similar things with you, and you kind of talk as a group, and it's very interesting to hear other folks talk about similar issues, and once you realize that other people are going through similar things, it's kind of refreshing and kind of nice to as much as you don't want other people to have to go through issues, right? It's nice to kind of hear some of the similar stories and realize, hey, you're not alone out there in the stuff that you're going through. Again, so like I said, this is kind of a short episode. I just wanted to really talk about that real quick. But I would leave you all with, please, if you're on the fence about trying to go to see a provider, just make that first appointment. All right. And if you can't make the first appointment, maybe have somebody make it for you. If you're really struggling to make that appointment, or you're concerned about what you're going to have to deal with, reach out to somebody that's been to one. Even a lot of the clinics and providers will, have great websites with that explain the process, right? But there's a bunch of different avenues out there for you. There's a bunch of different avenues to turn to, and I would implore you, if you're on the fence, try to take that next step. It's a big step, but in the end, I think it's a helpful step. And again, if you're the folks out there that have been to providers, try to be willing to share your story. I know it's hard to share the story at times, but again, sharing your story is just going to help one other person feel more comfortable in starting their own mental health journey. So, I'd like to do a thank you for all the listeners out there. I couldn't do this without you all. It's been great. I appreciate the fact that you listen, and I appreciate the fact that you're there, and I appreciate the fact that I know you're all on your own journey. And I think, if, like I always said, if we can reach one person with these podcasts or these things that we talk about and get that person help, then we're successful, right? So I'll leave you with the, stick around, stay tuned for the next episode. We got some great stuff coming down the pipe in the next month or so. But yeah, we'll talk to you all next episode. Thanks, and have a great night.
Raise your banner if you need help, and raise your banner to let others know you're a safe person to turn to. Until next time, stick around and keep on moving forward. Research conducted by Matrixa Research Group. Artwork created by Jenna Bordinger at jbordingerart.com or at jbordinger_art on Instagram. And music by Josiah Renton, DJ Slowbro.
Thank you.